directly from the board on what makes a high performing board come to life, and some of the different components that go into the decisions we've been making on policy, and how to bring the organization to new levels. Today, we are going to be talking about regional support. Uh, we have gone through so many different journeys when it comes to supporting our regions. We did some consulting work, I'm going to say maybe 7 years ago, looking at our regional model, our infrastructure, how we have the leaders set up in each of the regions, uh, comparing our organization to other nonprofits that are also member driven and regionally set up and not regionally set up and not member driven, right? Like just a comparison across the industry to try to understand how we should set up for the future for managing growth, and for managing growth while keeping that sense of familia. And regions help break down a huge organization into smaller pockets. So we know that regions actually help us create a sense of community, because if you're just part of an organization of 30,000, 50,000 people, you can kind of get lost in the crowd. So we know regions are important and we want to nurture our regions. The question is, how are we going to do that? Right? As we grow and as we bring in more members and more chapters and all of that, um, how is it that supporting regions can make us a stronger organization? Do you guys have thoughts?
Well, when I kind of think of it, I mean, in a sense, I think back at like how our government itself is structured. You know, we have obviously the House of Reps, we have like the Senate, and their jobs, each chair is to represent their area. But obviously, they need support from the government overall. Um, so it's important for us to show them like we are here and we're trying to hear you out of what it is that you need in order to grow. We understand that like even right now we're living in a very interesting climate, where
Yes.
things are changing. Like the resources are not as good as it might have been like many years ago. So hearing those voices and trying to, you know, pull in as many resources as we can and provide that support to them.
Yeah, very much so. Jonathan, I'm thinking of regional chants and just how much camaraderie and uh, I want to say love, but it's not like love. Um, but there is love, brotherly love, in the regions, and I wonder what the student perspective is on that.
Yeah. So I think that regional support is very important. Obviously, sorry to mention already, CHIP, it serves a wide variety of people in a wide variety of places. So the fact that the different regions are able to support those specific locations at a more wider scale, I think is very important. For me, I'm a part of Region 1, so I've been really trying to be able to get more involved in any way that I can. I was the president this past year for UC Merced, so we always had those monthly calls amongst each other talking about what ideas we're doing, how we can help out others in terms of, for example, maybe I need to figure out how to make a sponsorship package, but I don't know where to start. Another president will tell me, hey, here's how you can start, here's how we did it, and then just kind of go back and forth with each other, right? I think that's very important because obviously at a chapter we can establish a whole like community and a whole familia aspect and support each other, but
Mm-hmm.
there are also going to be times where we're not going to be with our specific chapter. So to get that branch of networking for through other communities that might be similar to ours or maybe a little bit different, but just to show that camaraderie that you were mentioning earlier, that's very important to anyone, I would say.
Yeah, for sure. And so what gets lost sometimes and people don't always realize is how much effort goes into creating that sense of camaraderie and coordinating those regional activities and programs. And our ability to grow that even further is limited because now you're asking someone not only to be president of a chapter, but to actually be managing multiple chapters at a time. And so if someone doesn't bring the right skill set, even if they have a big heart, the work is going to suffer and the region is going to suffer. So I think it's really important for us to, as a board, continue to look for ways to bring real support to the regions for execution. One of the things that we were really good at a certain point in time, and then, like any program, it ebbs and flows. And so, in the downturn of the regional leadership development conferences, we were trying to figure out, okay, what's the next thing? How are the regions going to come together and continue that networking at the local level, well, regional level? And we haven't found like the right model yet, which is okay, but creating infrastructure and bringing in more resources to help the regions make these decisions and implement these programs can only help. I don't see why that would be a negative. I mean, what have you guys seen happening regionally? What kinds of events and programs have they been putting on?
Yeah, like so kind of going off of like what you're saying, like I think pre RLDC and then post RLDC is like a very different time frame. I remember like I went to like the last RLDC, I want to say, before COVID kind of kicked in, and then that was kind of like post COVID is when we no longer saw those regional conferences. Like it was virtual, but after that we saw more regions having the flexibility to kind of create their own events, and sometimes they kind
Mm-hmm.
of not copy each other, but they get inspiration from each other, and they all do it. So like one of the big ones this past year was a variety of regions. I believe it was 3 or 4 of them. They had their Shiptina conference, and this was I would like it, they had done Shiptina conferences in the past. I remember being a student and going to the Merced one, but now it's like at a different level where it's a larger agenda. You know, you're having students coming from like different regions to come to those events. And then there's also some collaboration with some of our like sister organizations. So I saw like Region 5, they had one with like NESB. So there's that flexibility, but I do understand at the
Mm-hmm.
same time of wanting that support to also help build those, because it's like kind of in a sense them building their own RLDC that's not necessarily like a structure given to them. So sometimes
Right.
like flexibility, I think, can be scary because you're like, okay, like how do I go about planning this? There's not necessarily like a template behind it. Um, so yeah, those are kind of events, and I think definitely that we can continue building off and figuring out how to support them and structuring those different events.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
To add on to
for
that,
sure.
I know that
Please.
for the Region 1 at least, we always had those meetings that we were talking about earlier, and they would always ask for student input. There was a lot of times where, for example, the San Jose State, they're very big on wanting to collaborate with all the other chapters. They're in the Silicon Valley, so very big when it comes to engineering. And they always want to try to get their professionals out, and they also want to get their students out. And whether formal or informal, kind of tying back into what Alejandro was talking about, there's not really too much detail they can really put into when it comes to actual overall structure of it, but there is a lot of like I guess passion, I would say, if you could call it, where people just want to bring that aspect into other members and just make sure that
Mm-hmm.
everyone's getting along together. And even though it's not like RODC, I went my freshman year, and it was honestly it was one of the biggest reasons why I'm here today. But it's not the same. But at the same time, that could be a good thing because the students can be able to make it more tailored to what they think is needed amongst each other, and they could probably be the same for professionals and even legacy members as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure, for sure. I like that perspective too. Um, our regions, it's my expectation as we look into the future and where the organization is going, and as we grow, I think regions are going to become even more critical in membership retention because a lot of individuals that, for financial reasons or whatever, they don't like traveling, like convention is not always, not always. If we have 30,000 student members, only 10,000 go to convention. The rest, the bulk of our membership lives and loves the organization in their region and in their chapter. So how effective we are at strengthening our regional structure and strengthening those regional programs over time, I think is going to really um, say a lot about our ability to manage the growth that we are foreseeing and that we are pursuing. So, yeah, I think that definitely providing more support is important. Uh, have you guys thought about what that support can look like? I know what we're proposing, and we'll talk about that later in a separate session. But are there ideas? Like, what can that support look like for regions? And if you don't have any, that's okay. This was
It's
kind of
a
a
very open and
impromptu.
yeah, it's a big question, but um, I think definitely, and it really depends. I would say like it depends who is kind of coming off of those positions and who's coming in. I have
Mhm,
seen it where, maybe there was someone that like they kind of took on the role because there was a vacancy, and then, life happens. Like people get very busy and they kind of step out of ship. But I've also seen it where someone steps down and is kind of mentoring that person from, going into that new
mhm,
position, where, and
mhm.
that I think is where we have issues when it comes to like getting people to run for elections, that they're scared because it seems like a very big commitment, kind of like you were saying earlier. Am I gonna like be able to like fill those shoes in? And the point of like us offering these, opportunities to our members so that they can grow, like you will be given those resources and you will be connected to people who have done what you are about to do, so you're not
Yeah.
necessarily alone. So in a sense,
Mhm,
like developing like a pipeline that is successful, and gives people that trust that, okay, like I'm not going to just
mhm.
be thrown into the fire, like I'm going to be supported through this process.
Yeah, for sure. That makes me think of, it actually gets me excited thinking that people are going to want to get involved and that they will feel more encouraged because they see that the process is not so intimidating because there is support. There is someone that knows this region and that is here, for the next 5 years or however long, that staff person can support. And so when they go into the role, they're not wondering, am I going to be good enough? Can I do this? Right? They're going to know that ahead of time as they're coming into those roles or even considering the roles. Could I ever be a regional VP? Right? Like now you have a more structure and you can feel more confident that it is possible for you to do. I think it's going to have a good impact on us. Did you want to add something, Jonathan, before we finish this topic?
I mean, I agree with everything Alejandra said. The whole time
Yeah.
reinforcing the idea that there's always support when it comes to stepping into a big of a role as this, right? Obviously, the impact is great. There are a lot of times where people can kind of overthink about like very big commitment, as you guys mentioning already. So, for me, it's just a fact to be able to, again, think about, oh, someone's been through this before. Let me reach out to them. Hopefully, they can tell
Right.
me a little bit about how they went through it, and then let me see if the situations and circumstances are the exact same for me to try to maybe not fully solve the problem, but at least get like 3 steps
Yeah.
ahead, right? I think that's the most
Yes.
important part out of it. So everything else is just fine. That's all for me though.
All right. Awesome. Well, that's why we want to make sure that in the policy changes that we're proposing for this year, that we addressed some of the voids we saw in the infrastructure today, making sure that we are filling the voids and preparing for what regions are going to be in the near future and in the long-term future. So thank you for joining us today. Stay tuned. There's more coming.